Morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's edition of the MPC Markets Morning Call. It's the 8th of April, 2026. Now, overall, it's a bit of a funny situation. Around about a half an hour before the close today, we had a passing of the baton, some may say, whereby President Trump, by proxy, has handed the taco over to the Pakistani Prime Minister. Now they've conveniently put in a request for a 2-week ceasefire just 5 or 6 hours before Trump's deadline. He had some pretty big fighting words last night. There was some pretty serious words said, to the point where we even had like the Pope step in essentially. But yes, it was taco by proxy, that's for sure. Again, look, we're seeing this thing escalate, as you can see here. There's the US attacks, just heightening as well. Where it was a fairly big one there. It was about 410 attacks. Probably that's the second biggest of the conflict so far. Probably around about the second biggest for Iran as well, at 140. So those averages are getting worse, not better overall. We had we've had the big story about two pilots being rescued. And look, here we go. I mean, with the oil flow, obviously this chart's a pretty boring chart, just accumulates, but basically what that does is it counts the deficit of barrels of oil, and it just pretty much adds 10 million barrels a day. So 37.6 days, if peace or a ceasefire in the Strait of Hormuz was open today, which according to the Pakistan Prime Minister is a possibility, it's still going to take 37.6 days to get back to any remote sort of normal. And what you are going to see, obviously, what you are going to see as well is, then we're going to have to assess any of the damage that's been done to infrastructure. So we haven't seen too many, any more troop escalation, which is probably a pretty good sign that, that Trump's really not going to go beyond this blitz of the Strait, or bluffing to blitz the Strait, etc. But, a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will. Well, you can imagine who that was, Donald Trump. Pope Leo stepping in. I mean, that's, you're probably taking it too far if the Pope feels that he needs to say, calm down. But, that's just me. But yeah, so we did have, we had crude essentially fall away about 2 or 3% on this at the time, and then we are now showing that the WTI futures are back at 108. So we've dropped about probably, we've dropped $2 since the close. We've probably dropped about 1 to 2% leading into that as well. Brent was also trading lower, so obviously the market's taken it as pretty optimistic overall. So this is an effect on inflation. Obviously, the longer this being, the higher inflation is going to generally be. The Republicans keep coming out and saying, it doesn't affect us. It doesn't affect us. It only affects China. Well, I mean, China's kind of getting oil from, and the US is having to deal with the fallout of global oil prices being higher. So it does affect them, but what you've got to what they're saying and what's actually going on are two very different things. This inflation will be, it's going to be 3 to 6 months down the line, but look, there'll be massive hope. I would say for people to, for this to potentially end. I mean, the fact that the equity market's anywhere near where it is here at the moment is an absolute miracle. And look, we're having a look here at the moment. It wasn't the greatest of nights, but you got Broadcom jumping up on the back of it's inking a long-term AI chip supply deal with Google through 2031. United Health also jumped up about 9%. Healthcare sector generally, well, Humana was up 8% as well, higher than expected Medicare or Medicaid Advantage rate increase for 2027. So yet again, the whole RFK thing is really just disappeared into the background, and there's a lot of really good cheap companies out there, I would imagine, in that healthcare sector that are just absolutely ripe for the buying at the moment, and they're non-cyclical as well. If this inflation filters through to to soften the economy, I personally think that's a great area to be in at the moment. But apart from that, really, I mean, Apple was down 2%, which we're on a product innovation announcement. Essentially, they're going to have a foldable phone that's going to be launched with their normal marketing timeline, which will be later in the year. Samsung's already kind of done it. Motorola's tried and failed at it as well. It was more bendable. It'd be interesting to see what Apple comes out with, but I mean, let's face it, except for a new processor and a new camera, they haven't done anything since about 2012. So anything will be an improvement from the innovation part of that company, albeit that they're still a massive cash cow, don't get me wrong. But but you sort of saw the wind come out of the sails of some of these consumer staples here as well. So that's more the defensive part of the market. So see, I mean, very, very faint sort of push of risk on overall based on that heat map realistically. So these were essentially like, I mean, the S&P, we're using sort of futures there, but it eked out again. It was 0.08 or something like that. The Dow was slightly down, but I just felt the need to put in the futures because we rallied in the aftermarket as well. So, we're starting to see these technicals slightly improve as well. I wouldn't say I'm particularly bullish. I think this uncertainty really just, a passing of the torch on the taco and a 2-week ceasefire, which, I mean, the deadline comes up in about an hour and a half's time, and it's 8:30 at the moment, Sydney time. I mean, Blind Freddy could tell you that he's definitely going to go, oh, well, the new information's come to light. We're not going to obliterate them, et cetera, et cetera. And the equity market will just probably deal with it over the next couple of weeks, whether there is an actual ceasefire or not. What the equity market has definitely proven over the course of the last month is their capacity for optimism that this is going to be over soon is enormous. And they're very much sticking their head in the sand about the long-term effects. It seems to be a bit of a tomorrow problem. But overall, I would definitely say you've still got to be cautious around these levels here at the moment. We do have US earnings coming up, which is going to distract a lot as well. I think President Trump will be very thankful for that overall. But look, but the conclusion we've sort of come to over the course of the, particularly the last week or two, is that, there are the most reliable thesis in this market is there is President Trump, and then there is the Donald Trump. Now the Donald is very worried about, his family legacy. His ego is worried about, he loves to name a building after himself or a library or something. He's worried about his family fortune and legacy of wealth to future generations of his family as well. We show just almost no shame in front running, announcements and orders, or I mean, even that announcement from the Pakistani Prime Minister last night was timed beautifully. And I'm not being a conspiracy theorist. It's very coincidental that every time that there's an announcement along these lines, it's just set up nicely for the equity market to rally or for oil to get hit. Overall, you've got to rely on, one of the most reliable things in the world is human self-interest. In the case of Donald Trump, I mean, that's probably, to the power of 100. And I'm more looking through this from the perspective of in 2 years, 9 months, and I think 12 days. Not that I'm counting. That's what he is realistically putting at the top of his priority list. And the presidency in the US and the US dollar, etc., probably not high on his priority list either. And look, weakening US dollar, I think, is almost part of the plan. He's been a massive fan of crypto. He's been happy to let the US dollar weaken. And I dare say the US dollar, if this is going to be, perceived to be resolved, and the Iranians will be furious at the perception that it's resolved, because that's their major game. And by accident, realistically, Trump may have just fallen into the solution here is shut the hell up, and threatening them just makes it worse. But I give the same advice to my kids. They don't listen either. But but look, I think we'll have the US dollar regime is downtrend overall, particularly, and I think it'll be let to run overall. So we got the new MPC calendar here, because of the Easter holiday. Essentially, we there's not much this week. We got Progressive Corp and BlackRock. We got FOMC minutes, PCE tonight. We got core CPI, that'll be Friday morning, and next week is when we sort of kick off, to truth be told. So Monday don't tend to have earnings, and this is all in our time. So this Goldman's and Fastenal will come out with their earnings. It'll be around Tuesday. You got JP Morgan, Johnson & Johnson, Wells Fargo, Citi, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, one of the Mag 7, well, one of the Mag 7 from 2 years ago, Netflix, which will probably be closely watched, and then Blackstone. There'll be a lot of focus on the private credit part of that. I would imagine. But earnings will be a welcome distraction. And what we're starting to see analysts sort of go, well, geopolitics aside, we're still expecting earnings growth in the double digits, maybe even early teens. Well, we'll see whether that actually, is going to pan out or not. Again, guys, this is only going to be for a limited time because we're starting to get quite a few of these. We've got our new portfolio checker, or portfolio guardian, Prism. It's a piece of sort of software, AI software that we've written, which is based off our 70 odd years of experience in reviewing portfolios. You can upload multiple portfolios, etc. The fact that this is sort of the equivalent of about 4 or 5 hours minimum of work that we used to have to do, now we can do in a very short period of time. This will probably be only running for for the next week and a bit, because we started to get quite a few. But scan the QR code, and it'll take you to the form, and then you just submit your portfolio, and then we'll run it for you, and then we'll have a chat about it. So we've got a bit of no hassle guarantee. If you don't want to go beyond that, when there's no sales guys here, we're all markets guys. So, we'll leave you alone. Mosaic as well, scan the code, get a month free, get to test out all the recommendation services, but importantly, all the content, which has actually been super poignant. All of these, podcasts and these interactive maps and things that we've been doing from a very early stage has helped us get long oil. We actually trimmed yesterday in oil futures as well. We've been, sort of seeing the forest for the trees in a Trump era. That's really important, because you can sort of, we've just had oil drop. It's about 8:32 here. Oil's dropped a further 3% up to 104 here at the moment. I don't know what the news story is as it stands, but I'm assuming it'll be something along the lines of President Trump making some sort of remark. But this sort of wraps it up. You'll have to go and check that out yourselves. I may put a comment in the socials, but it's quite a bit of volatility happening here in crude futures at the moment. It's bouncing around 50 odd cents at a time, and yeah, I'll just attempt to have a bit of a look here. There doesn't seem to be anything necessarily on the wire that I can find. I'll chuck it in the socials and wind this up. We will speak again tomorrow.